Deadpool negative. Back again. Sorry, it's just been difficult to. I've been my health has been improving. The pain is going, but in the hand, the shoulder. I don't know if that's ever going to get fixed. Just kind of had to live with me looking weird. But I wanted to talk about this. Is actually kind of really difficult, so I'm going to make this quick. On March 15th, writer artist Sam Kieth, best known creating the Maxx comic and TV show, passed away at the age of 63 due to Lewy body dementia. Now, Mr. Keith had not been seen or heard from in the comic scene since 2020 when the final two issues of Batman, the Maxx Arkham Dream shipped after a 3 year delay between issues 3 and 4. Um, I just assumed he moved on to greener pastures. I think a lot of people did because he was a he and his wife were private people. Um, but to find out he's not only died, but died from something as awful as Lewy body dementia is a real blow. Because if you look at, like, there are people that nobody could draw like. Nobody could draw like Gil Kane. Nobody could draw like Joe Manili. Nobody could draw like Sam Kieth. I, like a lot of people, first noticed his work um, on Marvel Comics Presents, specifically in the wake of Weapon X storyline you know, it's kind of crazy to fill out, which is a comic which is unquestionably the best Wolverine story ever written and one of the best comics Marvel, not written by Chris Claremont, I should clarify that, and not written, excuse me, the best Wolverine story, not written by Chris Claremont, and one of the best comics Marvel ever published, Weapon X by Barry Windsor Smith, followed with a strange, comedic, almost surreal story about written by another person we lost too soon, Peter David. I believe he was only 66 when he passed last summer. And he, I mean, like, it's just hard to describe his art. It's like weird yet human. It's able to switch to, I think the most interesting way to describe his work is able to switch through surreal landscapes and realistic portrayals of a quote unquote real world without really sacrificing his style. It's more in just the way he would, because one of the things about the Maxx, it took place in two realities, the quote unquote real world and the Outback. It was the way he would lay out the pages in the Outback versus the way he would lay out the pages in the real world that would differentiate. And I always thought that was fascinating. I, like a lot of people, jumped on the image train when Keith did with the Maxx, first appearing in Dark Image Anthology, then in his series. And it was probably one of my favorite series that was published at the time. And that series also helped establish a very important friendship, very, very important friendship um, with a person that I didn't think I would be friends with. Um, but it became, you could argue that it became a sort of a Max Julie relationship because the premise of the Max was a homeless man who'd been transformed into some sort of super being, and Julie, the social worker who takes care of him, and they keep switching between the Outback and the real world, trying to figure out what's going on. And there's a mysterious villain called Mr. Gone, who's a real bastard trying to screw it to both of them. And it was co-written by William Mester Loebs. He was the scripter, but Keith was the primary creative force behind it. Um, I really enjoyed it. I was sort of disappointed. The main storyline runs through issue 20, and this friend of mine and I remember actually reading that on her couch because she couldn't get to the comic store, so I went there, got an issue so she could read it. We read it there and like, wow, that was interesting. What happened? And then that was the story he wanted to tell, but the animated show had come along, and while that didn't do quite as well as they'd hoped, it still was stuck in a lot of memories. Um, but and after that, he shifted focus to a supporting character named Sarah, made her the point of view character for the comic, and Julie and the Maxx sort of went away, and there was a new Maxx, and this is all established in a comic, an issue written by Alan Moore of all people. He had enjoyed the comic so much, they gave him a uh, um, he established um, the new status quo as said with Sarah as the main character, and there were a lot more and it became more about exploring the character of Mr. Gone, and then Mr. Loeb's left to let Keith script it full time. And around issue 26 or 27, I kind of lost interest. The book became a little too dark for me. Um, so that was it for me in the Maxx, the series. I really loved it, though, and I loved the show, and I would always check out what Keith was doing next. He did a lot of Batman comics for DC. I think there's enough to fill a compendium or a Tales of the Batman Sam Kieth hardcover. He Darks and Confidential. He had a miniseries called Scratch about a werewolf that teams up with Batman. And along this time though, 20 years ago now we're talking. This friend and I, the Maxx friend, she and I separated, kind of. Basically, she had to go away, and like the Maxx, I thought I would disappear if she did, and that caused a complete fracture. And it got to the point where I couldn't even read the Maxx anymore. I, they published it in all these collections when he took the property to IDW. They published it in all these collections, and I just couldn't bring myself to buy them. I couldn't put them on the shelf because it reminded me of someone who I thought at that point was gone permanently. And I regret that because a lot of the series is not in print, and there's apparently a rights dispute that hopefully might be resolved. Like, according to Rich Johnson, there was some sort of rights dispute regarding the character, and may not see it reprinted for a long time, if at all, depending on what his wife and his estate plan to do. Even when Batman Batman Max Arkham Dreams came out, I read the first issue, and I was blown away by the artwork of the story, but I couldn't buy the second issue because of this person. But there's a happy ending in here because this Maxx friend and I, like Julie, she did come back eventually, and we eventually patched things up. And I could remember the Maxx fondly again, where I just kind of cut myself off. Unlike Sal Buscema, whose death I posted about, I did meet Sam Kieth once. He rarely did conventions on the East Coast anyway. He was a kind man. He was, very humble. He wasn't wearing shoes on the convention floor, which I thought was odd. But it seemed like he was just humble and happy to be there. The people appreciated his work. I wish I still had those signed copies of Maxx #1. But again, You know, me and the Maxx friend did reconnect though, and that did make me feel better about the book. And but I'm trying to communicate is the Maxx meant a lot to me. What Sam Kieth in that series meant a lot to me. It helped form me during my teenage years. And while I did get to meet Mr. Keith and tell him how much I enjoyed his work, I never got to tell him how much it meant to me. And I'm sorry he suffered in his final years because he was a nice man. And I wish I could say some more, but it's actually too hard for me right now. I need if the Maxx series does somehow get reprinted, I hope I get a chance to read it again. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Once again, make sure you let those creators know what your work meant to them. You may not have the time to do so. Talk to you later.